everyone. Today we're going to be talking about how to translate expressions from verbal to algebraic. So I'm going to take words that describe an expression and I'm going to turn them into numbers and variables like we've seen so far. So when I'm translating expressions, the first thing I want to do is I want to identify my operation words. Now, operation words tell us what operation to do. It tells us whether to add or subtract or multiply or divide. So let's talk about some of those words. Words that tell me that I need to add, obviously we have the word add, but also things like more than or plus or increased by. Or something like sum. Remember the word sum, S-U-M, is the result of an addition problem. So if I have something like 6 plus 1 equals 10, 6 plus 1 equals 7, 6 plus 1 equals 7, 7 is the sum. It is the number that is a result of an addition problem. So when it's looking for the sum of something, it's asking you to add those two things. We have some similar words when we work with subtraction. We obviously have things like subtract. In this case, it would say something like subtracted by or subtracted from. Okay, subtracted from is probably what you're going to see most. But you also may say things like decreased by or less than. And then, just like we have sum over here with addition, the result of a subtraction problem is called the difference. Okay, so if I have 8 minus 1 equals 7, 7 in this case is the difference. Okay. I'm going to come back to variables, but I want to jump down to multiplication words for a minute. So some things that tell us I need to multiply twice the number, 2 times the number. Obviously the word times, they say 3 times 5 or 3 times 72 or 5 times whatever. Times tells us I want to multiply. I may also see things like double or triple. You also may say something like of. Half of a number. Okay, so be careful with of. Of tells me I want to multiply. You may also see the word factor, like increase 7 by a factor of 2. That word factor tells you want to multiply. That one can be tricky. It's not one we see very often, but it does mean that I'm going to multiply by that number. And then just like we have sum and difference, the word that means the result of a multiplication problem is called the product. So 3 times 4 is 12. 12 would be the product. Okay. And then division. Of course, we have divided by. Divided by 4 divided by 5 tells me to divide. But there's also a result word, just like sum and difference and product for division, and that is quotient. Okay, so quotient is the result of a division problem. If I've got 4 divided by 2 equals 2, that resulting 2 is the quotient. Okay. Those are important to remember because once we get down to our grouping words, that's very similar to the result words that we were talking about, sum, difference, product, and quotient. Now, because these are expressions, they will likely also have variables in them. So we can see variables written in a couple different ways. We normally see a number or some number. But they also may come right out and say what the variable is. 3 minus x. They may just give you the variable then. Or something like a number n. That means they want you to use n to represent that number. Okay? Lastly, I want to talk about exponents. We're not going to run into this a whole lot in this class, but if I've got words like squared, that tells me I want to take the number and write it to the second exponent. Okay, we've covered that a little bit. But there are also other numbers like cubed. Means that I'm going to use 3 as the exponent. So it's going to be to an exponent of 3. And then something called power. 4 to the 3rd power. Or x to the 8th power. Okay, so when we're using words like power, that's talking about the exponent. So I'm going to do x to the b power. Okay, it's important that we're clarifying what is talking about multiplication, twice times double of factor product, and what is talking about exponents, x squared. X squared does not mean 2 times x, it means x to the 2nd power. That 2 is an exponent at the top. Okay, this will come with practice. Recognizing these words for what their operation is, whether they're asking you to multiply or divide, is only half the problem. This gets much easier as you practice through. So let's do a couple of examples of working through this. So my example says half of a number minus twice that number. Half of a number minus twice that number. So the first thing I want to do is identify some of the operation words I have. I've got half of, I've got minus, that's a good operation word. Twice is another operation word. That number. Okay, some things that we're looking out for. A number, half. Okay, so I'm pulling out each of those pieces. Once I've identified those operations, I can translate, which just means change. If you want to write change there, that's okay too. I'm going to translate each piece of that to numbers or symbols. Okay, so I'm going to start from the left and work side to side and do that translating first. So half tells me the half of, we talked about down here, of is a word that tells me to multiply. So it's going to be 1/2 times, right? I want to multiply there, a number. I don't know what that number is. I can use any variable. I like to use x. You can use any letter you like. Sometimes we'll see n, but what letter you put there as the variable is up to you, unless the problem explicitly tells you what letter to use. So minus, I know, tells me to subtract. Twice is a little tricky. Twice is a multiplication word. That means 2 times this thing. Okay, so twice means 2 times. And I'm doing that little multiplication dot there so that we don't confuse that with the x. And then that number. Okay, I'm using x to represent the number, so I want to make sure I use x again there. And then the last thing I want to do is arrange my pieces. Okay, I need to arrange those pieces. Now that seems like, what do I really need to do there? It already says half a number, so 1/2 times x. Okay, remember with multiplication, you can write things directly next to each other. That represents multiplying. If you'd like to put that little multiplication dot in there, that's okay too. Minus twice that number, 2 times x. So you may see it written like this. You may see it written a couple of different ways, but making sure that this represents 1/2 of a number minus twice that same number. Okay. When I'm arranging my pieces, I need to watch out for a tricky little thing called turnaround words. Turnaround words are words that tell me I need to change the order of the numbers. Okay? The big two turnaround words are than and from. Okay? Than and from both tell me that I need to flip what's going on here. So this says 5 less than a number. Okay? I can change out my operation words, so 5 becomes 5. Less than tells me to multiply. A number I'm going to represent with x. So 5 less than a number. Okay? But less than is a turnaround word. Than tells me I need to flip those things. It's not 5 minus x. I'm starting with the number, and then I'm taking 5 away. 5 less than that number. I have the number. I'm going to go minus 5 to take that away. So I actually end up needing to flip these because less than is a turnaround word. Same thing here with from. I can translate my pieces. 8 subtracted from a number. 8 subtracted from tells me I'm going to subtract. And then a number, I'm going to use x to represent that. But that's not 8 subtracted from this number. This is 8 minus that number. From is a turnaround word that tells me I need to change the order of these two things. This tells me I need to do x minus 8 instead. So make sure you're checking as you arrange your numbers, make sure you're checking for those turnaround words than and from. Okay? We're going to look at a couple more examples of these, but I want to talk about grouping words. So we already talked about what the grouping words are, which are sum, which tells me I'm adding, difference, which tells me to subtract, quotient, which tells me to divide, and product, which tells me I'm going to multiply. Okay. Use the dot there. Grouping words are usually presented as the grouping word of this thing and this thing. So the quotient of this and this, the difference of this thing and that thing. So one way that we can really make sure that we're using these grouping words correctly is to break this into pieces. Okay? I like to write the operation under the and. I'm going to find the and in this sentence, and I'm going to put the operation there. So I've got the quotient of twice a number and 5. Well, quotient tells me the operation is to divide. And I want that division to happen where the and is. Okay. Then I'm going to look on either side of the and for my two pieces that are being used in this operation. So a number, not a number, twice a number, and 5. Okay. So the quotient of twice a number, that's the first thing, and splits the two things up, 5 is the second thing. So if I was looking here at my example, the quotient of twice a number and 5. Okay. So now I can start looking at those. Twice a number. Remember, twice tells me 2 times. A number tells me I want to use the variable. So this is going to be 2 times x over here. If you do 2 with a little dot and then x, that's fine. If you want to just do 2x, that's okay too. Divided by, and I know that that's going to be divided because it's a quotient, but that's where the split happens, is at the and then 5. So I get 2x divided by 5. You can see this written in a couple different ways. Remember, division shows differently. So 2x over 5. Okay. But the division is the same. Okay, I would take either of these because both of them show the quotient of twice a number and 5. Same thing with my second example. I need to identify the operation word, so the difference of a number squared and 4. The difference tells me I want to subtract, and I want that subtraction to happen where the and is. Then I can look between the of and the and for the first piece, a number squared. Well, a number tells me to use a variable. Squared tells me to put an exponent on it of 2, right? We talked about that right up here. Okay. Then my 4 is 4. And now I've got that that subtraction sign where my and is. That helps me to split this up. So the difference of a number squared and 4. Like I said, this is going to get easier and easier as you practice it. But I want you to watch a couple more examples, and then I will have you try this on your own. So, number 1, 3 subtracted from half a number. The first thing I want to do is identify my operation words, or my words that represent numbers. So 3 is going to be 3. Subtracted from tells me I'm going to subtract. Half, 1/2, and a number, x. I translate each of those pieces. Then I'm going to arrange those pieces depending on what I need here. Notice here that I have from. From is a turnaround word. That means I have to take this side, this thing on this side, and replace it with that thing on that side. So instead of 3 minus 1/2 x, like it looks like it would be here, that from tells me I need to flip those things. So 1/2 x is going to come first, minus that 3. Okay? And again, there are a couple different ways you can write this. If you want to write half a number as x divided by 2 or x over 2, that's okay. Most of these things are going to have multiple ways that you can write them, but the operation words should stay the same. 1/2 of x minus 3 is 3 subtracted from, flip that turnaround, half a number. Now, number 2 is a little tricky because we start to bring in those grouping words. So I'm going to pick the things that I have. So I've got 11. Less than, that's going to tell me to subtract. The product of, so here's a grouping word. The product of tells me to multiply. And I want to make sure that that multiplication is happening at the and. Okay. If you want to think about putting parentheses around this whole thing, that's fine. So the product of a number and 4. Well, a number, I'm going to use x. 4 is going to be 4. So you can do x with the little dot 4, or you can represent this as 4 times x. If you write x4, it's technically correct, but normally we put the number in the front. Lots of leniency on what that looks like. So I've got this less than here again. Remember, than tells me I need to flip this. So I need to flip the product and 11. Well, my product was 4x, or x times 4. And I'm subtracting 11 from that. So however you wrote this is correct. Okay? But it's less than the whole product, which means I need to make sure the number and 4 are staying together. If this is a little bit confusing, that's okay. This comes, like I said, with practice and with time. But I want you to write down any questions you have right now, and then I'll show you a couple more examples. So we're going to start with some straightforward ones. 5 more than a number. So I've got 5. 5 more than tells me I'm going to add. A number is going to give me that variable, n, x, p, q, whatever. I'm going to use n just so that we don't confuse this with multiplication. Now that I've translated, I need to make sure that it's in the right order. This is almost in the right order, except that I see that than, which tells me I need to switch these two things around. So I want my n to come first, and then plus 5. 5 more than a number. Okay. Number 2, the quotient. Quotient tells me I want to divide, but it is a grouping symbol. Come on. So I want that division to happen where the and is. Okay. So the quotient of 6 and a number. I want to divide 6 divided by n. So I can write that very straightforward as 6 divided by n. That's perfectly fine. You may also see this written as a fraction of 6 over n, or 6 divided by n there. Either of these is correct. Okay. Number 3, we're getting a little more complicated. I've got 8 less than tells me to subtract. Twice a number is 2 times the number. You can write it with the dot, or you can just write it as 2n. Then I check this. I've got that than, so I've got to switch these around. I want my twice a number to come first. I'm still subtracting, and my 8 is there. Okay. If you did this as 2 times n minus 8, that's correct as well. Okay. Number 4, we're dealing with some more grouping words. So I've got the sum tells me to add, of this thing and this thing. The addition is going to happen where the and is. So I've got my 8 times a number. 8 times a number. So you can write that as 8 dot n, or 8 times n, or you can write it as 8n. Either one is okay. And 5. I don't have anything in here that tells me to turn this around. So you can write it as 8n plus 5. Or like I said, you can do 8 times n plus 5. That's fine as well. Okay. Twice the sum of a number squared and 20. We're starting to get more complex in these expressions. So twice means 2 times. 2 times what? 2 times the sum. Okay. This is where those grouping words start to come in handy. The sum tells me I want to add the sum of this thing, and that addition is happening at the and. A number squared, n to the second power, or n with an exponent of 2, and 20, 20. Now, unfortunately, I cannot write this as twice the sum of a number squared and 20. Okay, this is not correct here. Because what this tells me to do is twice the number squared and then add 20 after that. And that's not what my expression here tells me to do. What I need to do here is do twice the sum. So 2 times that whole sum. So I'm going to use parentheses to set that sum apart. Then I can do the number squared and 20. Okay? That's another one that will come as you practice this. Be careful of those grouping words, especially when you have things like twice the sum, or twice the difference, or twice the product. Okay? Finally, number 6, I have the product. Product tells me to multiply, but it's also a grouping word. So it's going to be the product of this thing, and that thing. And that multiplication is happening at the and. So 3 is there's 3. A number cubed is going to be x to the third power. Okay. I don't have anything else here. So the product, 3 and a number cubed. So 3 times a number cubed is perfectly fine. You can do 3 times a number cubed. Remember, a number directly next to a variable tells me that I'm multiplying, so it's perfectly fine to write that as well. Okay. So I'm going to let you practice these, 7 through 12. I want you to copy them on your paper. I know it might take a little bit of time, but copy them down and try your best to translate these to numbers. Okay? show all of your work so that if you have questions in class, we can make sure we're answering them. But I want you to try to translate these to the best of your ability. And then I want you to pause the video and work through those, and then come back here and check your answers against my answers. All right, check your answers for 7 through 12. A couple of things to be aware of. Number 7, remember that from is a turnaround word, so that tells me I have to switch the 3 and the n. Same thing with number 9 with that than. Okay. You may see these in different ways. If you did 1/2 n plus 6, that's great. If you did n over 2 plus 6, that's also great. Same thing with number 10. 2n divided by 4 or 2n over 4, both of those mean the same thing. So if it doesn't look exactly like mine, you may still be correct. Number 11, we need to be careful with that difference of a number. It is 2 times the difference. It's not 2 times the number, it's 2 times the difference. So I want to make sure that I have parentheses around that difference of n minus 10. Okay. If you have any questions, make sure you copy them, write them down on your paper so that we can go over them in class. Thanks so much.